what's the word meek mean? When the Lord says the meek shall inherit the earth, what does that mean? Because he didn't say weak, he said meek. Meek is power under control. And in many respects, that was what we saw of Charlie Kirk. He was power under control. You only wield the amount of power and influence Charlie had at his young age under control when you recognize the one who is ultimately in control and the humility that goes with that.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Signal Sitdown, but before we get to the interview, we'd love it if you'd hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you may be joining us. And please remember to give us a 5-star review because we love your feedback. Remember, it's your government, and together we'll expose how it really works and how to affect real change. Without further ado, here's the interview. Steve Deace, welcome to the Signal Sitdown.
Happy to be here, and you guys are tremendous, and pardon the pun, have quite a heritage. So I'm happy to be here. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much for coming.
Dad jokes
today.
are all I have left now.
I'm so honored to be with you because we have a very special episode remembering the legacy and memory of our friend Charlie Kirk.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be in this position had it not been for Charlie. I know that you wouldn't be in the position that you're in had it not been for Charlie. And to probably ask the most emotional question of the show first. 10 years from now, you've been on college campuses all over the country, you speak at events all over the country, and 10 years from now, there's going to be a high school student or a college student come up to you and ask you, who was Charlie Kirk? How are you going to respond to that question?
The best of us. The brightest light that we had, which is exactly why the enemy wanted to take him out. A true Renaissance man. A lot of people that have a vast giftedness become jack of all trades, master of none types, where they're just kind of pretty good at a lot of things. And I mean, Charlie could be an ace broker behind the scenes of political deals and alliances.
Ask the vice president.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, Charlie could be one of the great evangelists and apologists of the era at the same time. And then, I mean, Charlie could offer an immense amount of grace and mercy to somebody caught up in the throes of gender madness on a college campus who comes to challenge him about his faith and offer them a great amount of grace and mercy, and then hop on a plane, go over to the UK, and where debate there is a little bit more vehement than what we're accustomed to. And right after showing that great amount of grace and mercy to somebody who hates him for what he thinks, get on a plane, go across the pond to the UK, and then just turn right around and rip their lungs out and show it to him. And there's just not a lot of that. There was no difference from what I saw of Charlie. There was no difference from him publicly or privately. And I had a chance in the last few months to have a few sit-down private dinners with Charlie. And all the inquisitiveness that you saw publicly, he was all there. He was aware of the influence and power that he had, but it was in a self-aware way. It was not in a narcissistic way. And you know, what's the word meek mean? When the Lord says the meek shall inherit the earth, what does that mean? Because he didn't say weak, he said meek. Meek is power under control. And in many respects, that was what we saw of Charlie Kirk. He was power under control. And a man only wields the amount of power that he had, particularly at his young age. I mean, I'm 20 years older than Charlie. You only wield the amount of power and influence Charlie had at his young age under control when you recognize the one who is ultimately in control and the humility that goes with that. And his void is impossible to fill. It's gonna take a movement now that picks up the pieces of what happened to him. Now, the one thing I will say though is, whenever the martyrings begin, that is always when the enemy thinks is the most worried, thinks that the power is slipping from his fingers, that his ability to just subjugate people with psyops and narratives and slick presentations and Faustian bargains and monkey paws isn't working. And so things have got to get more aggressive. And the challenge for us now, we need to mourn. And it's okay to mourn. And frankly, his legacy demands that we do. And then when we're done, right, we clean off our faces, we wipe the last bit of tears from our eyes and snot from our nose, and we get up and we get back on offense.
Mm-hmm. Back on offense. That is somewhat of a theme of your relationship with Charlie. A long, special relationship the two of you had. Saw a viral clip of you, which really touched me because it was always a message that he was sending to me and college activists all over the country is, don't despair, we need you. Mm-hmm. And it was at a time in your career where you and Charlie were on opposite ends of things. Mm-hmm. And out of this awesome, wonderful friendship where you guys were coming up with all sorts of plans. Take us inside your relationship with Charlie Kirk.
So I initially got to know Charlie on the Cruz campaign, and he was very young. And I was, particularly because of I'm in Iowa, and that's the first in the nation caucus state, and everybody understood we had to win that or we were toast. So I was involved in a lot of the senior stuff. And I just kind of observed that he was a real go-getter and smart, but I didn't really see what we would all eventually come to see. And it was overall, ultimately, what won me over. He always was very likable. But what really won me over is he understood first things. And I what's different from me than Charlie is that I got converted and went all in on my faith before I went to work full-time in politics. And I think for Charlie, it was the opposite process. He was already a hardened, and I mean that as a compliment, meaning grizzled, successful veteran. He was already a hardened activist. And then faith comes into play. And I think that the way that he was able to implement that and let it frame his worldview and belief system in ways, because the idea that it makes you weak, it's the opiate of the masses, all those cliches, it made him better than he ever was before. And that's when him and I now began to cross paths in circles a lot more often. The biblical worldview space is not inhabited by a lot of people, so it's a very unfortunately, so it's a
vast Christian conspiracy isn't nearly as vast.
I wish it existed.
Sometimes not as Christian as we
looking
hope.
to join this conspiracy, and I'm like, where are the meetings? You know what I'm saying? And so we had a lot of the same friends, a lot of the same fans, donors, etc. And then just when it seemed like we were really beginning to kind of, he was having me on his show frequently, especially pushing back on COVID. There's no way Fauci and Bargan would have gone #1 overall in America without people like him and Tucker platforming us to put that book, front and center. But then we had this primary, and I just did not think Trump could win. I thought there was no way he could navigate all the various criminal charges against him. Just the amount of lawfare. Remember, they initially launched all we ever think about now is New York, because that's the only one that they got to the end game with. But remember, there were 4 of these. There was the DC probe, there was the Miami probe, there was the thing in New York, and another one I can't.
Georgia.
Yeah, Georgia. Thank you. And I just thought, we have to win. I don't think he can win. And I to this day, I'm a great admirer of Ron DeSantis and what he has done. I think he's the greatest governor the Republican Party's ever produced. And things got a little heated at times during that primary. And I will admit that I didn't bat 1,000 in how all those situations were handled. I'm disgustingly competitive. Okay. And when it was over, by this time now, Charlie has surpassed me. His platform's way bigger than mine now. And so he did not have to do this. He's in the same space I am in. He has surpassed me. Just his team cleaned my team's clock. And he did not have to do this, and I did not ask him to do it. But shortly after the dust settled and Ron dropped out and everything, he reached out to me and he's like, listen, we need you. Don't quit. Stay in the race. We need you. And those are the little things in that have an immense amount of impact on people. When you take time out of your schedule to give people an encouragement that you don't have to give them, that they didn't ask for, that's unsolicited, unprovoked, because that indicates a certain amount of selflessness. I mean, that's the very nature of what love your neighbor as you love yourself means, that you're selfless. It doesn't mean that you're like, oh, I'm terrible. Look how, that's another form of narcissism, that kind of fake piety. It's the idea that I do esteem others at least as much as myself, if not more so. And from that moment on, I recognized, and this would have been about 2 years ago now, and I recognized there's way more to this young man than I ever knew, even in the circles in the past that we crossed. And we spent a lot of time privately talking about things, biblical worldview things, back and forth. There are several times that he would ask me privately for my take on something, just kind of as somebody who's older and therefore has already made a lot of mistakes he's trying to avoid making. And I was asked to keep those conversations private, and I will, to this day. I'll honor that. And slowly but surely, the dust kind of settles. We win. It's kind of easier to bring back people that used to be in the insurgency, so to speak. Yeah. All right. And to bring them back. And, victory has 1,000 fathers and defeat is an orphan, JFK said. Mm-hmm. And, Charlie had me join the TPUSA Faith Circuit here this year. So I did several of those. We were going to do several more. In fact, one of the ones I was going to do, and I hope I still get the chance to do it. I saw Erica say Friday night, the tour will go on. I'm on schedule to do Jesus is Lord, Prove Me Wrong, which is the exact branding that Charlie was standing under when he was murdered. And I loved him. There aren't too many people very passionate about college football and biblical worldview. And I thought it was a club of one. Okay, me. I know my wife has told me for 30 years, brother, that the amount of idiot savant knowledge I have of college football, if I wasn't married, she'd swear I'm still a virgin, okay? If I didn't have your 3 kids, she says, I'd swear you're still a virgin, all right? He had that level. I mean, him and I we did an event together for the big donor set in December of 23 in Naples at some 5-star hotel. And we're doing this event together and we're getting ready. We've both spoken separately and now we're getting ready to go back and do where we're going to come together and do like a round table. And we are literally like in the middle of this entire program, in the middle of our talks, we're like texting each other, scoring, because it was conference championship weekend updating, weekend in college football. Mm-hmm. And we're like, we're texting each other the scores and the stuff that just happened. That's just not a large crowd. And now here's the thing I want to make sure everybody understands. My story and history with Charlie is not unique. You could have brought in, you mentioned Jack Posobiec earlier. I mean, Jack would have had a way more intimate relationship with him, being kind of in that inner circle the whole way through. But the story that I can tell you of my interactions and history with Charlie, I promise you, there's at least 100 people with blue check marks in our industry and movement who have those kinds of interactions, and that's what made him such a great leader, and that's what's going to make him so tough and so irreplaceable.
So irreplaceable. And part of this grieving process and part of channeling that anger towards its proper ends is looking evil in the face. What infuriated me over the past week is people like Bill Maher going out there and saying, well, we don't actually know for sure yet if it was left-wing violence. It could have been a MAGA guy, or whether it was Mr. Dowd on MSNBC, now removed from that network, saying that it could have been someone shooting that gun off in celebration. A lie, through and through, because if it was not left-wing violence, then their first talking point, their first narrative would not have been, what about Minnesota, which, by the way, wasn't a MAGA crazy person. What about Josh Shapiro, which, by the way, was about Palestine, Israel?
Yeah.
They wouldn't have walked out those talking points.
Right.
If they knew it had nothing to do with transgenderism, as soon as we figured out that this boyfriend of Tyler Robinson, the suspected assassin, was cooperating fully with law enforcement and saying that they were not advocating for political violence of any kind and helped turn this person in, the left would have put this person on a pedestal.
Agreed.
But they know that it's left-wing violence and that transgenderism has something to do with it. Of course, today we had a big press conference confirming what we knew all along, that this was targeted left-wing violence against Charlie Kirk. There's 7 charges brought against Robinson, the biggest one being aggravated murder. They're pursuing the death penalty. Your response to what we've seen?
On a meta level, the entire trans industry should be shut down and criminalized. These surgeries ought to rank up there with electric shock treatments and lobotomies.
You called it Transtifa.
Yes. Yes. I think that this entire thing is Island of Dr. Moreau level stuff. And here's why. We're messing with wiring beyond our capacity. We are taking the most intimate core and the first biological fact ever said about you and about me and about anyone who has ever lived is not, oh, look, they're non-binary, we don't know. The first biological fact said about oh, look, they were born in the wrong body. The first biological fact stated about every human being that's ever been born is it's a boy or it's a girl. And when you become a godless culture, something has to fill that void. We'll always make it ourselves. And now we think that we are qualified to tinker with mystical cosmic forces beyond us that we can't possibly understand, math we couldn't possibly begin to do, because we're mortal. We're sinners. It exceeds us. We're not transcendent. We're not perfect. And I think when you tinker with people on this intimate of a level, I think we're unleashing things we don't understand. Rather than urging them to go seek the counseling, particularly of the spiritual variety that they clearly need, and instead just tinkering with their psyches all the more, I think there's a large cost to pay for that for both the victim and then the rest of us that they later victimize. And this is just yet another blatant example. And I think these surgeries en masse ought to be completely shunned, completely banned and criminalized. On the micro level, the irony is that Charlie was really the last general we had left that was still trying to reach across the aisle. In fact, he changed my mind.
So many tweets that read, "Congratulations, left. You just killed the last person that wanted to talk to you."
Yes. I mean, I was convinced it was a waste of time for years. And this was after I spent 4 years as a contributor on MSNBC doing over 50 appearances. And so I thought I got a pretty good look at it up close and personal and knew, based on I wasn't just pontificating from afar. I mean, I'd been on their platforms. And so I just kind of thought the time of debate is over. You know, we're post-debate now. Charlie didn't think that and was having resounding success. Changed my mind too, which is why I decided, okay, I'll join the tour. You've changed my mind, you know? And so that is the great irony here. And I think it also proves, though, that Charlie was correct. You look at the headway and everything that he was making, and I think this threatened their power base. And I think at the kindest thing I think we can say is that the left in our country has cynically winked and nodded to these elements within their own side for political purposes, to intimidate us, and to cause us to self-edit, to stand down, to Langford ourselves. I guess I'm going to turn his name into a verb now. And I think that's the best thing you could say, is that they just cynically and naively thought that they could just, allow these kinds of radicalized and violent forces within their own ranks whether you want to call them BLM, whatever the manifest, Antifa, whatever the current iteration du jour is.
Kamala Harris told people to donate to the Minnesota Freedom Fund.
Correct. So
that's not a wink and a nod.
I know that's the best.
You're being charitable.
And that's not very charitable.
Yeah.
The most charitable thing I can come up with is you all thought you could let a little bit of evil out of Pandora's box to get the power that you wanted, and then figured out you can't really control it. That's not charitable, but that's the most charitable answer that I can surmise. And then all the other reasons for why they've done this over there get exceedingly bad and worse from there. And I think that in response to that on our side, we are going to have to get a lot more aggressive about this in response. Now, I know at the same time, we have this debate happening on our side and this term du jour, woke right. Okay. And number one, I've never met James Lindsay. I don't know James Lindsay. From what I understand, he is an atheist. With all due respect, I'm just not taking lectures on the boundaries for me as a Christian about what is an acceptable Christian public engagement or Christian public rubric from someone who denies the most basic fact of all of humanity, of all of existence, that there is a God.
I don't take public lectures from new refugees to this country about what America is. I don't take lectures from David Frum about who is and is not a patriotic conservative in the United States when he was still a Canadian citizen. I don't take lectures
100%.
from atheists about what wokeism is, one,
yes,
and the proper way to engage in a conservative and Christian country.
The term woke right, I don't even know what it means now.
It doesn't mean anything.
Because it kind of just seems to mean if you're, it should mean something. We are commanded to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. We can't on one hand say that we are godly and then act like God has no expectations for us either, right? Mm-hmm. So I mean, it actually should mean something. We should have these kinds of conscientious debates about how far are we allowed to go. But what I've noticed is this debate has largely just become, if I don't like you, for most people, not everybody, I'm sure there's people of good conscience, and some of them are friends of mine on both sides of this. But it does, most of the time it seems to me, if you are doing things in a way that I think that I don't like or I think is too aggressive, then you're just woke right. It's like a slam. It's like a pejorative.
Yeah. And you see so many conservatives falling for this, right? The first line, as we said, that the left trotted out was, it's both sides.
Yes.
Because they have to stretch any example that's before them to make it look like both sides. It's not. It's one side in particular.
It feels like woke right's going to be the new Christian nationalist in a way.
Right. But conservatives are falling for it. They keep going, you're right, Democratic Party. It is both sides. We all need to bring down the temperature. And listen, I'm all for bringing down the temperature, but what these weak conservatives mean by that is to pat everybody on the back.
We emasculate ourselves.
Give everybody a group hug and say it's okay, what's going on.
We just castrate ourselves.
We just castrate ourselves.
Yep.
Michael Knowles has made this point, and I think it's a great point. The marketplace of ideas cannot exist if the marketplace keeps getting shot up. And it's getting shot up.
Seems pretty basic and primal, but I agree.
Yes, and it keeps getting shot up by a particular side.
There has to be a marketplace for there to be a marketplace of ideas. First, there must be a marketplace. Right? And so, to me, I agree as a Christian, there are limits in what I am allowed to do. I agree that there are limits on me and how far I'm allowed to go. I would also argue as a Christian, we're nowhere near approaching those limits. We're not. And for every Nick Fuentes that I frankly find vomitous myself, there's 100 Mike Pences and 10,000 James Langfords. Right. Okay. We're not. And here's what I can also tell you: if you're concerned about the growth of Nick Fuentes as a platform, I cannot think of a better marketing tool for whatever his true mission is and his brand than us continuing to castrate ourselves even after our greatest general got murdered in cold blood and broad daylight.
Well, you know what I've noticed? My algorithm feeds me more Nick Fuentes clips because it noticed that I'm an aggressive conservative. Mm-hmm. I don't see anything about what Mike Pence is doing. Mm-hmm. My algorithm feeds me this stuff. It's recommended to me. And the more that particularly conservatives of older generations fall asleep at the wheel, you are going to drive all of these young people that Charlie worked so hard to activate and channel in a proper way.
Yep, in a constructive, proper way. Aggressively. Mm-hmm. They were aggressively, literally going door to door, man, like evangelists and missionaries of old. They were aggressive, but you're right. It was prudent and proper. It was, like I said earlier, meek. It was power under control. Mm-hmm. And so these are really the options we have before us, given the level of malevolent evil we're up against. the option will not be to do nothing. We may see the older generations, and I'm a part of those now, continue. And it's funny, you guys are coming forward in the younger generation saying all the same things that I've been trying to say for the last 15 years, okay? And all the stuff I warned my generation and my parents' generation about, all that stuff is now here. And too often they seem more afraid of you guys and what you're going to do in response. I think some of it, frankly, is you make them ashamed that they let this go on for too long, that they didn't go to a school board meeting for 25 years. Like I said, when I was talking to your group here today, in the town hall. And I think your aggression kind of shames their passivity and reminds them of that.
Right.
And so the option will not be further passivity. That's not on the table, because the other side's going to keep escalating more and more and more. So here are our options. We will respond with power under control, or we will respond with power out of control. There aren't any other options, all right? Either Charlie's legacy will be picked up and furthered, which is prudent, wise, but aggressive and principled confrontation of the spirit of the age. We will either do that, or you're going to see Nick Fuentes and whoever and whatever other acolytes he has grow in popularity and power, because your generation, rightly or wrongly, is just going to look and say, you guys are just going to let them just take everything we hold dear from us.
100%.
And that's the choice. That is the choice we have to make. And we don't have long to make it, frankly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the events of last Wednesday indicate that the sand is about to run out of the hourglass. Like the time is getting shorter.
How did Republicans win more presidential elections since the boomers came of age? Then they lost, and we still somehow lost the country. Mm-hmm. That's the question that a lot of young conservatives ask themselves. And Charlie understood this better than anyone.
Yeah, he did.
I want you to talk about this to close us out. The reason that Donald Trump is in the Oval Office right now, and that Vice President Vance is the vice president, is because of Charlie's work. Mm-hmm. And Charlie knew the importance of elections and coalitions and turnout. But it wasn't for the sake of winning the election. It was for real policy ends and real spiritual ends.
Saving the country, basically.
Saving the country.
Yep.
And to close us out, to honor Charlie, what do we want the country to look like in 10 years?
I think Charlie said his best life advice was get married, have babies, and go to church. And that is what much of America looked like for 200 years. That doesn't mean mistakes were not made. That doesn't mean people were perfect. That doesn't mean there's not red in our ledger and parts of our history that we're not proud of. But because we did those three things, we got married, we had babies, and we went to church, that gave us the perspective. First of all, there's no more selfless act you can have than to get married and put every day of your life another human being, as best as you can, put the interest of another human being, called your spouse, ahead of yourself. On top of that, next, have children. The perspective that instantly offers you about the minute you have kids, you start thinking about things in 20, 30-year increments and not 20, 30-minute increments. All right, so being married teaches you selflessness. Having children gives you perspective. And going to church reminds you ultimately whom you're accountable to, and that there will be a reckoning of that accountability, and your ledger sheet will be called. The master will return. He will settle his accounts. And having those three things embedded deeply into the culture down to the atomic molecular level is how we are able to now have the infrastructure. There was no foreign country that came to us and said, this slavery thing you guys are doing is terrible. This debate boiled up internally within the country, meaning that those three things, get married, have babies, go to church, provided the moral infrastructure for us to self-correct our errors as a people, or to have future generations come along and say, yeah, I love my mom and dad, I love grandpa and grandpa, but they got that one wrong, so we're going to fix that, right? And that sustained us for 200 years. And I think ultimately that, I know it sounds simple, but it's not easy. I can't tell you how many young men I hear from. Can I find a girl that I think is remotely cute and doesn't want to abort every kid we conceive? And I can't tell you how many young men I hear that from. Mm-hmm. Okay, I hear from young women. Can I find an actual man? All right. Someone that I can trust will take care of us. And it's harder to do those three things than it ever was before. But the math and the formula is still as simple as it always was. And I think that's what the enemy was the most afraid of. Because if you want to reset a culture, that is actually how it is done. And then that'll filter up to what you guys actually see, the quality of candidates that will come through your doors here at Heritage in DC, the quality of leader and politicians will improve because of the homes and the culture that they came out of. And I think Charlie was going, if you want to dam a river, you dam it at the source. If you dam it downstream, there's too much momentum. You go right to the mouth of the river and you build the dam there. And that's where Charlie was going. And I think that's what the darkness was threatened by, which means that's exactly what we want to do more of.
Steve Deace, thank you for coming on the Signal.
Thank you, brother.
Sitdown.
You bet.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Signal Sitdown. Before you go, be sure to hit like and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you may be joining us. And please remember to give us a 5-star review. We not only love your feedback, but it really does help the show. Remember, it's your government, and together we'll expose how it really works. See you next time.